Hi everybody, I'm back again, and see, I have this. What is this, you might ask? This is Guardian of the Sword. This is, you could say, wait a minute, isn't that book already published if you've been following me at all? And I say, yes, but. This is the 1982 version of it. The one that was originally published was the 1977 version. So what I'm looking at doing is reading this to see what kind of changes there were, and also to see, well, I think I might do a special edition. So we'll see how it goes, but I'm gonna, yeah. So without further ado, I'm gonna read chapter 1, and this is also while I'm trying to get everything, my setup ready for like doing more readings on a regular basis while I'm trying to do editing and stuff. So yeah. If things sound a little bit wonky, this is why I'm trying to test everything out so I can go with a better setup. Last time I was on one really weird setup, and now I'm on a different weird setup. So we're gonna try. We're gonna see how it works. It's looking a little dicey right now as it sits, but who knows? Okay. So without further ado, we have Guardian of the Sword, Chapter 1. Okay. Legend surrounds it, and of its origin we know only tales. It is said to have been forged long ago by the mountain dwarves, but its origin is entwined with the appearance of Arvindel. Of Arvindel, it is known only that he passed through the mountains to King Corel, and he aided Corel in quelling the rebellious barons. The name of the sword is to be spoken only in the direst peril to the land, and when it will answer the call, it will also bring the destruction of the one who calls. It is known only as the sword which is not to be named, or more simply, the sword. On his deathbed, Arvindel said, "The sword does not want to go to any who would take it, but must await its master. Many years from now, a hero shall draw the sword and use it in a mighty and desperate war." His family put the sword away, waiting for the foretold time, and took to calling themselves the Guardian of the Sword. 150 years later, the Hygerians attacked out of the west. King Gun, attempting to gather his forces, took refuge in the east of the mountains, but the leader, who guarded the pass, sold himself to the Hygerians. The men of Alsban were overwhelmed by the dark-haired men of the west. The king was killed, his army scattered, and a few faithful retainers took the young prince to a hiding place in the Icarian hills. For 5 years, the Hygerians worked at bringing all Alsban under their control. At first, they left Aventure alone, for it had a strong position on the edge of the swamp. But they must eventually deal with it, for it served as a haven for raiders. For 3 months, the ailing Arden, his brother Ross, and Arden's son Rorik held the castle. The Book of the Sword by Karen Barandus. "They come again, my lords." It was not a shout, but the voice of the young messenger rang through the half-empty hall where Rorik, Ross, and the captains of the Guardian's warriors took their evening meal. "Which wall?" asked Rorik, buckling on his sword. He was some 4 inches taller than the tallest in the room. Blonde hair over blue eyes, long nose, thrusting chin, altogether reminiscent of Arvindel, as seen in certain portraits hanging in the Guardian's quarters. "The west wall, my lord." "Who else but a barbarian," asked Rorik as he donned his red-crested helmet, "would choose the hour of the evening meal to attack?" The others in the room smiled, even as they began trooping out to the walls. Ross was at his nephew's elbow. 2 days, 3, perhaps a week more, he murmured softly. The wielder of the sword had best come soon, or there shall be no more reason for him to come. As the two mounted walls, Aventure's archers were already making use of their carefully hoarded supply of arrows. Rorik, after months of siege and assault, could see that this was to be a hard fight. Walking his sector of the wall, he paused here and there to exchange a word or two with some of the men. Lord and soldier by now had become comrades together, especially in this present danger. The mountains stood in blue haze to the west, and his thoughts went to Draxon, who had been given responsibility for the Guardian's Pass. At the other end, 200 men could hold it, and it had been important to the Hygerians after the king's magicians had blocked the old pass by their art. But Draxon, with his 500 men, had not made even token resistance. After a night meeting with the Hygerian leaders, he had led his men out to be trapped and killed. Shortly after, though, his preparations were incomplete. Gunn of Alsban had been forced to give a battle at Drick's Ford. White hair that wore the crown, old hand that bore the sword. Sad the day the foreign warriors waded north across Drick's Ford. It had been a day of dust, a red reeking battle, of charge and clashing charge, until the ragged red dragon standard fell, and no hands remained to raise it again. Then Arden had looked around at the battered remnant of Aventure's men and had said quietly, "All is lost. Let us save what we may." Word had come later that a few loyal men, acting on King Gunn's express order, had brought Prince Connell from that field to a hiding place in the Icarian hills, though it was shortly after this that the first few Icarians had spurned their old kingship with the men of Alsban, and had offered their serious services to the Hygerians. Aventure was strong, for here the Icarian river touched the edge of the swamp, flowing just below the east wall, leaving only 3 sides to be attacked. The Hygerians, unversed in sagecraft, lacked the means to breach the stone walls. Their method was rather to continue assaulting any walled stronghold until the defenders were too few to keep them out. And then, when the stronghold fell, there would follow a fierce and unchecked slaughter, which served to temper resistance to the next fortress. Also, Icarian archers were making a difference here at Aventure. They were few, but not many were needed, for Icarians were all raised from childhood to handle the bow. Before Drick's, Aventure had had a garrison of 1,000. After Drick's, recruitment had not been easy, and there had been some losses in the raids made from the castle. Then, with the passing of the plague this winter, they had numbered only a little more than 500. Rorik ceased his musing, then, as the swarthy men swarmed up the ropes and ladders, while Albanians fought to fend them off. Rorik himself always went to where the need was greatest, again and again rallying men to drive the Hygerians back from slim foothold. Then suddenly it was over. The last of the Hygerians had gone down the ladders, or had died on the walls, and Alsban's men slumped wearily at their posts. As Rorik, in company with grim-faced Ross, was reckoning up the fallen, a messenger found him. "The Guardian wishes to speak with you, my lord." Rorik descended the stairs to the courtyard, then entered the inner keep where his father lay. Seeing the bedfast man, Rorik could scarcely hold back his tears, remembering how Arden, through the force of his own will, had brought them back in a running fight from the ruin of Drick's Field. "How do we stand, my son?" "Not well, father. A little over 400 able to bear arms, perhaps 150 of those unwounded. Around 30 will not fight again for 2 weeks or more, if ever, though we have another 100 previously wounded, but now nearly well enough to fight again." With the luck of Thumel of Three Rings, we might stop 2 more attacks, such as they sent at us this evening. Malachire's dragons hunt the Icarians, but we have not long left if the Hygerians once make the decision to press their attack. If the wielder of the sword is indeed to give aid in a mighty and desperate war, I believe this is as desperate as anyone could wish for. Arden sighed. As I had thought, he said, but it was necessary to know certainly. The time has come. Help me up from this cursed bed. Father! If I die through rising from this bed, or if I'm hacked to death by Hygerian blades tonight, what is the difference? But I tell you this, if it is within our power, we must keep the sword from their hands. Now help me up. None disobeyed when Arden of Aventure used that voice. Rorik helped him up, and was led down into the storeroom in the lower levels of the keep, and into a room beyond that. Within that room lay a sword upon a low wooden table. It was a plain-looking sword, with a ruby pommel, in an undecorated leather scabbard. Arden leaned a moment against the door jamb, then stood erect. There, Rorik, is your duty. Take the sword and wear it until the hero finds you. No, we know that I am dying, that there is no hope of my bearing it away safely. My lot will be to surrender the castle. Rorik touched the hilt, wood bound with 3 brass rings, then began to buckle on the sword. Surrender Aventure? You will allow the house of our fathers to pass into the hands of barbarians while there are warriors able to fight? Arden sighed. Why kill the last of our warriors to delay the entry of the Hygerians by perhaps half a day? Better they and you should live to try to join with Connell in the hills. Rorik was shocked into silence, but Arden, as though reading his mind, continued. Yes, I know that your pride forbids your leaving the castle before the last blow is struck. But it is necessary, above all, that the sword not fall into Hygerian hands. It is no house nor piece of ground which the guardians watch, but the sword. It is the sword, and that alone, which is our responsibility. We fulfill our duty if we guard the sword until the coming of the wielder. Though we lose the castle of Aventure, though we lose all our lands. The argument being over, he turned and pointed at a section of the wall. Look over there. He pushed loose a stone with his right hand, pushed another with his foot, and heaved against the wall. After a moment of fruitless effort, he looked at Rorik. Put your shoulder to the wall here. Rorik complied, and nearly fell off his face as a section of wall swung back to reveal a dark corridor. There, said Arden, is your escape from here. It comes out in a small mound beyond the walls, in the swamp. The mound hides a small storehouse, containing a small stock of equipment. You must make your way around the rear of the Hygerian camp, but if you hold to the swamp, it should not be too difficult. I would suggest that you and your men divide into small groups, the better to avoid Hygerian scouts on the plains. Father, said Rorik, I am under your orders, and I will obey. But I protest being sent off to skulk in the hills, forsaking my duty to my home. I have said that your duty is the sword. Where and when the wielder of the sword will come, we do not know. But when he comes, we still hold the sword for him, then we may say that our duty is done. Now we will return. After having shut the door, they returned to Arden's room, where Ross joined them. Arden told him of the plan, and he nodded. It is best. All we could do now would be to kill more men for no purpose. I will select the men to go with you, Rorik. All will be ready by sunrise tomorrow. The sooner the better, said Arden. Powers grant that it is not already too late. It was dark, near midnight, Rourke judged, when one of the warriors wakened him. An attack prepares, my lord, on all sides save the river, with the Icarians spending arrows like the sliver of a drunken seaman. What of our men? Rourke already knew that the Hygerians were confident of success, attacking again so soon. Young Tummel said, if they come from all sides, they will escape us this time. Young Tummel said, if they come from all sides, they will escape us this time. Rourke grinned. He was now armed and armored, but he strapped the sword at his waist as well. He went out with the messenger close behind, mounting the stairs rapidly to the walls. Ladders scraped against the stone, grappling hooks clinked, and warriors took javelins from racks and leaned out to cast them. Dark helms showed over the ramparts. Snarling, swarthy faces came up, and suddenly swords shimmered like running water in the moonlight. Blade met blade, and shields rang under hard blows. The Guardians' warriors were stretched thin to hold the whole wall of the wall, and the bows of the Icarians had done their work well. The men of Alsbyn fought like heroes of the elder legends, but still, here and there, the Dark Ones found a foothold. 3 times, Rourke rallied the small bands of warriors to break such footholds, and each time found that another place was threatened before he was done, and each time there were fewer warriors to be rallied. Then, after the 3rd time, leaning on his sword to catch his breath, he noticed that the sky in the west was growing pale. Powers above, he muttered. How long have we been at this? From where he stood, he could see 4 points, where black cloaks and spiked helms ruled the wall, while down in the courtyard, Ross and a handful of others were keeping the Hygerians from the gates. Once again, the Hygerians were advancing on them, with harsh cries and bright swords, and Rourke had to fight. When he had respite, he had fewer men left, while in the courtyard Ross was fighting alone, forced away from the open gates through which a shouting horde came rushing. Flickering torches painted the scene in hues of red. Then Ross was down. With the dead scattered around him, and Rourke was aware of another battle going on the steps of the inner keep. There stood Arden, bearing only shield and sword, fighting heroically. But pride and strength of will could drive a fever-weakened body only so far, and even as Rourke realized that he was the last of Arvendel's line, he recalled the task and burden which his father had laid on him. The sword must be taken to Connell in the hills. This might be a difficult task of attainment, though, with the walls and keep aswarm with Hygerians. After a moment, he said, Arvendel's line were warriors all. The Guardian's house was born in strife. If I succeed or if I fall, I have lived a warrior's life. He turned to the 5 warriors left to him. My friends, my brothers, Aventyr's lost. It is left to me to take the sword to Connell in the hills. You owe me no further service. You may go now, and may the powers go with you. One of the warriors bowed. Guardian, we did not agree to serve your house only so long as victory was ours. Where you go, there will we go also, though death be at road's end. Rourke returned the bow. Come then. They moved with him and struck the Hygerians like a thunderbolt, as much by force of will as by arms. They went through the small group facing them and made for the nearest stairway. The stairway was crowded with Hygerians, so they went on. Only 2 warriors remained with Rourke now, and when they had fought their way past the group of men, he was alone. More Hygerians were coming toward him, and he could not possibly reach the next stairway. He ran towards them. Just before reaching sword distance, he vaulted up into one of the embrasures of the wall. He sprang from there to the Merlon, and began to run along the top of the wall, passing the first of surprised barbarians before they were aware of his movement. Then, Short Hygerian javelins were flying about him. He dodged them as best he could, speeding along the wall, for they came at his unshielded side. But one came too close as he leapt between the merlons, and twisting to avoid it, he landed off balance. Hopping to regain his balance, he missed his footing and was suddenly falling toward the darkly gleaming waters below. Releasing sword and shield, he managed to turn his fall into some kind of dive, the weight of the sword in his war shirt carrying him all the way to the muck at the bottom of the water. He was a strong swimmer and able to bring himself to the surface, somewhat beyond the light of torches falling from the walls. Ah, they want me. A compliment, I think. A little later, weary with exhaustion, he pulled himself out of the water and onto a wet bank, hoping to find some kind of shelter before morning, lest the Hygerians send searching parties for him. He pushed and blundered through the brush and deadfall until he fell against a mound of earth in the center of a grove. He remembered Arden's words that a tunnel ended in a low mound concealing a storehouse, and he inspected the site carefully. A small tree on the mound bore an A rune carved on its trunk, somewhat crudely, and from its looks, very, very old. The only other feature was an irregularly shaped stone, nearly as big as a man's chest, just below the rune. On impulse, he lifted the stone. Underneath was a stone-lined shaft, with narrow stairs leading down to a solid door at the bottom. He opened the door, but it was dark within. Loath to enter without light, he retreated up the stair and gathered some dry grass and twigs. He had flint and steel in a belt pouch, though water had leaked in and dampened the tinder. Crumbling some dry bark and grass, he struck sparks to it. He made a small fire on the step of the entrance, low enough to be invisible from the castle, in case any Hygerian should be looking his way. Taking a small stick for a torch, he lit it and entered the room. As Arden had said, it was a storehouse, containing arms, armor, and some clothing. This reminded him of his state, so he stripped off his armor and clothing, and changed. After replacing the stone from inside, he made a pallet out of several cloaks and lay down to rest. Though certain he would not soon sleep, it was late morning before he came out of his sound slumber. Okay, so that was the first chapter. It's a little bit different. I mean, I don't know. I'd have to compare it with the first chapter from the 1977 version. In some ways, I kind of like it. In some ways, it's kind of, I feel like it's a little flatter. Yeah, because it had been written and rewritten so many times that I feel like it might have been overwritten. Yeah, I don't know, but this story is still there. This is the same basic premise of the story, which is interesting because, pardon me, those of you who have read The Crystal Crown, which is available for free everywhere except for Amazon, because I don't know why Amazon. I need to basically tell them to make it free, but it's free everywhere else, so everywhere else you can get it free, do so. But that story talks about Arden as well, but not this Arden. This is Arden the Fair. There's another story of Arden the Grim, and yeah, it takes place, that's where it's a little hazy about when it takes place. I believe it actually takes place after this. It just takes place much earlier on. Yeah, it makes it kind of interesting. So yeah, hopefully this turned out okay. I'm gonna check the sound on YouTube because I'm a little bit nervous about that one. But yeah, if this was working out, then I'm gonna probably post a schedule next week about what, like, once I get the sound quality down, and then I'll actually put everything out to let people know once I start a regular schedule. This is kind of a test, also because what I'm going to be doing with these are editing them, except for this one is not being edited. I'm going to be doing something else with it, and I'll talk to you about that later. But it's also the new format, more of me testing out the new format that I kind of want to do, which is work on the chapter. This one's going to be a little bit different, because normally what I'd be doing is marking out any editing issues I have with it. This is, instead, I'm just going to be scanning the chapter after I'm done. But when I'm doing my other readings that I'm going to be editing, I'm going to be marking them up as I go, so it's kind of like live editing, but I'm reading it out loud so I can kind of hear what it sounds like to see if there's anything that sounds awkward or needs to be rewritten. This is how I'm planning on trying to amp up and produce more books better. Yeah, so from there I will talk to you all again really soon. Thank you for tuning in, and I will talk to you tomorrow. Have a good night.